Hello and welcome.
Hi everybody, welcome. I'm John.
And I'm Greg, and it's that time of the week. Let's leave the music just a little bit in the background there. It's been a fun week for us. I've got so much news to talk about in terms of the DJI FPV drone. In terms of, we've heard people crashing it, we've heard people loving it. It's something that's happening. There's a lot of people talking, and there's a lot of differences of opinion. And we're going to talk to John in a few moments about his experience with the drone. But before we do that, let's ask the question, John. What can you do in Australia? What are you allowed to do?
Well, technically, sadly, the airplane's not strictly legal here. The only way you could get around it is if you're a member of a flying club, radio control flying club, and the club had procedures where you can operate flying FPV with an observer. But it creates some problems because many parts of the world, strictly the airplane's not legal. I think Canada may have some rules that allow you to have an observer and just instigate them. But here in Australia, you're supposed to have a trained observer, a person who's qualified and on your license, and to do it all properly, which is, going to make it tough for some.
Okay. And in America, though, you don't need a specific trained observer, well, he should be trained anyway, but what can you do in America?
Well, I'll defer to my American colleague who we were discussing this earlier. Lloyd, would you, it's a little grey, I believe, the grey area around that.
Let's get Lloyd's mic in over here. Let's bring Lloyd.
There we go. I'm making this up as I go along.
Yeah.
The dogs have got something to say.
Yeah. No, by rights, we have to have a visual observer here as well. It's one of those. Yeah, there you go. A visual observer. That would meet the American requirements right there, the U.S. requirements right there.
So, ladies and gentlemen, we'll have these for sale very, very soon. OzByDrone is going to have them for sale. Your very own DJI spotter for those people living in America.
DJI might do that, you never know. They might pick that up.
It's not a bad idea. And I'm sure there's people out there that would love them for all sorts of reasons, but we won't go there. But yeah, you're supposed to. Actually, I think what I heard the guy say the other day, you were supposed to not wear your goggles and keep an eye on your drone and then occasionally drop your goggles down. Most people do it the opposite, though. They keep their goggles on and then they'll go, okay, it's still there. But they still have to have some schmuck standing next to them saying, oh, I can't see it either. Let's bring it back,
Yeah. So a quick little, let me bring it back just for a moment. Today is a global fly-in, and we've got Trevor who's going to be on screen in a little while. I'm going to go get him set up. But in the meantime, John, do you want to talk a little bit more about your experience flying the FPV aircraft?
Yeah, I will. So I got it on Wednesday, which here is the 3rd, and that was the release day. I couldn't wait to get my hands on it because, we'd all heard so much about it. I can tell you that it's an absolutely fun airplane to fly. There's no doubt about that. And, we've seen DJI put some really good products together, very nice stable platforms and quads and so forth. So here they are. They've talked about it being a bridging aircraft for those that wanted to get into FPV racing. Now, I can understand FPV it would take offense to some of the way that they've done this, for sure. But for someone who hasn't done FPV before, in terms of FPV racing or low-level stuff, it's absolutely great fun. The goggles are magnificent. The experience itself, for many people will just be overwhelming. It's wonderful. So you're flying. You've finally got wings, and the reality and the immersive nature of it is that you can just, float around if you like, which I intended to do on the first flight. I just wanted to float. I didn't need to go fast. But by the 3rd flight, I was going fast as I could actually go because it was such a great experience.
I'm just going to interrupt you for a brief second, John. I got Trevor on my screen. Good. I'm just going to try and get him up. Oops, that's the wrong one. Wrong one. Okay, get my producer to put him up. There he is. So we've got Trevor, and he's down in South Australia, if I remember correctly. Now, Trevor, don't try and talk too much and respond to us. We'll have a little bit of echo. while he's going and getting ready to take off, a couple of quick little interesting fun facts. So Trevor was flying, if I remember correctly, with a Mini. So he's using the DJI Fly app, which technically speaking can't do RTMP out. Let's leave that on the screen though. Where did Trevor go? My producer took him away. There we go. We've got him in this 4-shot there. So what he's doing, he's using his smart controller with a HDMI output, which is connected to a USB dongle connected into a computer, which is ingesting the virtual camera feed into OBS, which is sending it out via RTMP to my Nginx proxy, which is then ingesting it into a copy of OBS that I've got here, which is rendering it and then sending it out via NDI across to Wirecast, and it's then going into the computer that you're seeing over there. What are we talking about?
There might be some lag, possibly, in that if it takes as long for it to happen as you did to say it.
Exactly, yeah.
Lloyd, you're sounding a bit funny at the moment, just so you know.
I'm sounding what?
You're sounding a bit robotic.
No.
Uh-oh.
His bark is worse than his bite.
Yeah. Hang on a second.
So we've got Trevor going for a fly there, but it looks like... Oh, there we go. It's back again. It froze for a moment. So he's down in South Australia there.
Is that any better?
No, I think I might get you to reconnect, Lloyd. It's just sounding a little bit awful today.
Okay.
Just
all right.
Close the window and restart.
No problem.
So again, by the way, a couple of other things as well as the complexity of getting Trevor in here today. We're not only on our channel on OzByDrone, we're also simulcasting today on Lloyd's channel, Grumpy Vlogger, on 400 AGL, and also on Thunderbird 6's channel. So we're going out to a few different places, and if you'd like to be part of this in the future, please do get in touch with me and we'll set you up the next time we have a global fly-in. We want to make this a truly global experience, so yeah. Now, Trevor, after he's flown, will be in the chat and he'll be able to tell you exactly where it is that he's flying, but looking good. So while we're watching that vision, John, let's talk more about the FPV quad. You're saying you're absolutely loving it. You're getting into it speed-wise?
Oh, it's a fantastic machine, very, very capable machine. One of the things right away is interesting about all of the talk about it being illegal in terms of having an observer for the air risk. There's going to be very little air risk in this airplane by the way it's operated. The way I can see it, most FPV work happens very close to the ground. That's what's exciting about it, is flying along close to the ground. So, however, as the air risk reduces, the ground risk definitely increases. And there will be a significant ground risk with this airplane. In manual mode, if you ever get to manual mode, in it, which is basically true FPV racer style controls, the aircraft only has a very basic stability in terms of it's pretty much hands-on flying without any of the normal stability that you would expect. And going at high speed, even just to pull the airplane up, requires significant skill to pull it up in a straight line, and hover. So they've got a button on there called brake and hover. So it's like a panic button. And if everything goes bad and a pear shape, you just hold the button and the airplane, bang, brakes as quickly as it can and stabilizes itself. So that's a great get out of jail free card for it as well. I found sport mode for the first 2 or 3 times to be quite exciting enough. So you won't get the full 90 miles an hour, 140 kilometers an hour, unless you go to manual mode where the body angles can be higher. But look, the thing that overwhelms you is the vision is so incredibly clear, and the experience of being in the goggles. So if you've flown a lot FPV goggles, you're familiar with the sort of the grey outs that you get occasionally, a bit of shadowing, all of these things that even the best goggles seem to suffer from time to time in terms of video. We didn't see any of that. This is an absolutely rock steady, beautiful 4K picture inside the goggles themselves. The lenses are high quality. The screen itself just displays this beautiful panorama with a wide angle of 150 degrees field of view, and it absolutely grabs you right away. The experience grabs you right away. So it's good, I suppose, for the FPV world. There's going to be a lot more people coming into this space, flying with the training wheels on, I think, at first, I hope, because it once you take those off, it's a weapon. There's no doubt about it. It's a weapon.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm hearing what you're saying, and you're loving it, and you're pretty much saying the errors and the crashes are going to be pilot error, but we are seeing a fair bit of buyer's remorse from some of the more well-known people. I mean, we've had Ken, who did what I would call a little bit of a hard touch and go. So he made the mistake of looking down in the viewfinder in the goggles to have a look at what his speed was, and the next thing you know, he'd accidentally had a touch and go. But it was not a graceful one. It wasn't a particularly hard one, and certainly any other FPV quad on the market, it would have survived that. But his battery was absolutely cactus after that.
Yeah. Well, the battery's exposed at the bottom end, and look, call a spade here. That's pilot error. So he's bounced it on the ground hard and damaged it.
He has.
I can tell you, before you buy this thing, unless you map out a little way of getting comfortable with the airplane first, like I've decided to do the first 25 flights at a reasonable height without stretching it too far, and 25 flights, 5 hours on the machine. The temptation, of course, is to go hard straight away, and you'll be sorry because you'll damage it. You can't expect, if you talk, remember the FPVs, with all the great guys we've had on here, the first thing they'll show you is their bag of propellers. They're buying bags of 200. That's because they crash all the time. That's because they hit things all the time. It's just a nature of FPV. So the rest of us are going to have to have a little cry when we do this, and obviously just roll it back a little bit. So I haven't crashed mine in 3 flights. I'm not going to make any promises. That's it. I already know that.
In all honesty, it wasn't a hard hit. I've got toy drones that I've hit a whole hell of a lot harder. This was a bump. I mean, really, it was a slight bounce. And for $1,300 friggin' dollars, that battery should have been a hell of a lot more sturdy, in my opinion.
Right.
And it wasn't really pilot error as much as it was just, he just did a bounce. And I saw the video, and it's a crock for $1,300. That battery, that's $160 battery, and it's a piece of crap.
I'll disagree with you, Lloyd. I'll disagree with you a little bit. It was pilot error insofar as if he hadn't bounced it wouldn't have happened. Yeah. But having said that, it needs to be
that made it be that way.
It needs to be a lot more resilient to.
Yeah, I'm not happy with the thing. Just what I've seen.
Well, you can buy it, Lloyd. You can buy cross brace arms for it. These are carbon arms that run from the front arms, motor arms, to the rear motor arms. They bolt on like to actually brace the aircraft.
But how would that protect the battery?
Listen, I'll tell you what. If that's for cartwheeling, I mean, I can't imagine the sort of damage that you're going to do cartwheeling this thing. And the bounce, if that's a light bounce, I wouldn't expect this thing, and when it touches the ground at speed, to survive at all. I know we're talking about real high speeds here, 90 miles an hour.
Well,
it wasn't at speed.
It wasn't at speed. It was very light. I mean, like I said, I sit down harder in my chair than that thing hit the ground.
Right. So here's the thing about the battery.
It's a piece of crap battery.
It is a battery that's exposed to the bottom, so the aircraft sits on the battery while it's actually taking off, which is interesting as well. So one of the things I thought about the design, which is interesting, when you plug the battery in, you've got 2-side catches, you've got the cables at the top, and then I put the aircraft on the ground, and I thought, hang on a second, that's sitting on the battery. So there is a lever arm movement. There's pressure on the actual battery being mounted itself, and I think that's what we're seeing now. If you did do that, how it damaged the circuitry, I don't know, because the battery feels quite solid. It feels like a fairly solid item. It's a 6S. It's definitely heavy. But one thing about this thing is it's a heavy airplane for the size of it.
Yeah. Well, look at the I just saw what T-Bird put. Yeah. But yeah, you look at the spark the battery's on the bottom, and I guarantee you I've set my spark down a lot harder than that, and the batteries were still good. It's obviously either it was a bad battery or it was it's something they screwed up. It's a flaw in the design.
I could accept that because we know if these airplanes, if you drop a battery, on the ground, the same thing happened. I would suggest you're right. I would suggest there's a design problem in the battery being robust enough to handle the job. If it was just a bad battery, we'll know because eventually there'll be enough people that drop batteries that say, well, we haven't seen a repeat of it. So we just got to wait on that to see what'll actually happen.
I just, like I said, I want to make that clear because if that's the case, well, $1,300, I paid I could buy several used Sparks that have better batteries for that. Yeah, I agree. I suppose that the cost here, Lloyd, too. Looking at the goggles, one of the things that seems to surprise a few people is that the price, including those goggles, is because we're used to paying a lot more for goggles, than we would in a combo. Yeah. The only thing that I was a little disappointed with, but I'm going to fix, is I only got one battery, so you can fly for up to 20 minutes depending on how hard you go, then the fun is over. Unless you've got another, in Australia, a $230 battery, unless you've got some more of those. So, it's going to get me in. Of course, the good thing is I'm a vlogger, and I'm not going to buy it anyways. But I sure like a good argument. That's your get out of jail free. That's your get out of jail free comment.
Exactly.
I use that for everything.
So let's take a little pause. We've still got Trevor in the corner there. But for us, we're going to get into the news for a little while. We may come back to Trevor. We'll allow him the opportunity to go and, I don't know, change positions or do something.
We can keep him there, can't we? While we're doing the news, can we keep him there?
Why not? Why not? So let me go over here, and the problem is when we do the news, we've got vision that we need to go and share for that. So we'll come back to Trevor intermittently. Yep. So right now it is time for...
Joe Blaylock wants to know is there RTMP in the DJI Fly app?
Yeah. No, there isn't. And Trevor got around that by doing it this way. He used...
No, don't mention it again. We heard it.
A HDMI out and managed to work out the rest of the geeky stuff. If you can't do that, then so be it. Oh, my producer's doing some very creative stuff over here at the moment. Look at this. Oh,
look at that.
She's got our news replacing Grumpy. I mean, there we go.
I knew that would happen. That's good.
So right now it's time for the news, and as always, OzByDrone news is brought to you by AirData UAV. Is your drone healthy, or is it about to surprise you on your next flight? Don't wait to find out. Discover the under-the-hood details and review early signs of problems before you take off again. Use the discount code OzByDrone20 for a 20% discount. There is a link in the description for our video. Now, our first story today
sit back. Yeah.
is entitled The Flappy Drone. Scientists from MIT, Harvard University and City University of Hong Kong developed a drone with soft actuators. Each actuator takes the form of a thin rubber cylinder coated in carbon nanotubes. When voltage is applied to the device, the nanotubes produce an electrostatic force, which both squeezes and elongates the cylinder. Once that voltage is shut off, the cylinder contracts back to its default state. Therefore, by rapidly switching the electrical current on and off, the actuator expands and contracts, flapping the attached wings almost 500 times per second as it does so. Check it out.
A team of researchers from MIT, Harvard University, and City University of Hong Kong have developed tiny, agile drones who look, act, and maneuver like actual insects. This new generation of tiny drones are powered by a new class of soft actuator made of thin rubber cylinders coated in carbon nanotubes. When voltage is applied to the carbon nanotubes, they produce an electrostatic force that squeezes and elongates the rubber cylinder. Repeated elongation and contraction is what causes the drone's wings to beat very fast and with enough power density to actually support flight. Typically, drones require wide open spaces because they're neither nimble enough to navigate confined ones nor robust enough to withstand collisions in a crowd. However, these insect-sized drones can flap its tiny wings nearly 500 times per second, giving it the ability to recover if hit or involved in a collision, and do some aggressive maneuvers like somersaults in the air. This insect-like resilience is packed into just 0.6 grams, the approximate weight of a large bumblebee. The researchers hope one day the robots could aid humans by pollinating crops or completing search and rescue missions and navigating complex machinery to ensure safety and functionality.
So some really cool technology there. Now, we've seen a little bit of this before.
Wow.
Now, that one, to be fair, I don't know if you could see it through your video stream, John, but they've got tiny wires connected into those sensors there for that prototype. So they've got to solve the problem of getting enough power to be held on board for that. But look, it looks very, very interesting. Early research, but looks very interesting.
Yeah, that's amazing. You just never know. Every day turns up something new in this game. It really is.
Absolutely. Speaking of things new, the Aussie launch of Australia's potentially game-changing Loyal Wingman drone. It's flown for the first time. It is the first clean sheet aircraft that Boeing has brought to fruition outside of the US, and the first military aircraft that Australia has independently produced in over half a century. It's not clear exactly when the flight took place, but it did occur at the high security RAAF base Woomera and its surrounding ranges. So this is the Loyal Wingman. We did see them before where they've powered up the engines, but this is actually a flight of Australia's first commercial military style drone.
Wow, that's very cool. Greg, just an aside, I don't know whether you saw today the news about the new morality training that they're going to have. I think they called it that, ethics training, I should say, because of the facial recognition and AI in the Loyal Wingman program. They've brought ethics trainers to Australia to discuss with the military how they're going to work through with the legal system about the ethics of how the airplane determines its targets, which is really interesting.
I just hope they didn't get their ethics trainer from the United States.
It's also interesting timing because this is the kind of stuff that I think was being discussed in Congress in the US recently. I heard something about that.
Well, the great, I think, what's the eye of the, what's that movie called where they're in the dilemma? The two drone pilots don't want to fire because they don't feel it's ethical to do so. And they're in a bunker in Arizona. What was that movie, Lloyd? Eye of something. Eye of the. One of our listeners will know. I've forgotten it. A great movie, and Jesse Pinkman from Breaking Bad, Aaron Paul, is in it, and he plays a great role. But it raised a couple of interesting things, in terms of how this happens. Now, if you've got AI that determines someone is wearing a suit full of plastic explosives, there's a good reason to suggest that they might not be going to do their shopping, or they may be, but they're taking some extra hardware with them. So how you move forward with that is that if that target's going to be threat's going to be eliminated, what are the procedures for deciding whether that's a target or not? So the military's going to a new area, a whole new era, if you like, of artificial intelligence. And the airplanes are seeing them on board first, which is really interesting. But they'll go beyond that. I think any kind of targeting, now this will become up as a subject in terms of what is selected as a military target.
Without trying to put words into their mouth, I would personally suggest, in the first instance, any AI is for the purpose of detection only.
Detection only, that's exactly what I was going to say, yeah.
The decision to engage once a target has been identified for then future tracking, it can say, right, this is a target. Yes, I agree, it's a target. Now track it. and then there's an additional decision, neutralize it for lack of a better description, and that would again be a human decision. I would never, ever, ever want to see that in the hands of AI.
Unless, of course, they're in the United States, and then we're not allowed to shoot them with our own drones. You know, it doesn't matter how bad they are.
Yeah. Now, speaking of AI, our next story, drones with the most advanced AI ever are coming soon to law enforcement. Founded by Google veterans and backed by $340 million from major venture capitalists, Skydio is creating drones that target this market, pardon the pun. This year, America's Border Police will test out automated drones from Skydio, who recently announced that it had raised an additional $170 million in venture capital funding, and the business is valued at $1 billion, bringing the total raised for Skydio to $340 million. Wow. Now, this imagery, it's just something that happened to be on the story where we found this one. It's not necessarily from Skydio, but it helps you to think about something. There's a sensor and it's categorizing and color coding and doing the analysis of everything that it sees. And that's kind of what Skydio, I think, is going to be having. It's going to have the AI to go and do a lot of that based on what we're seeing here. Moving on. Yeah. So I'm just having a look. Whoa, we've got him coming down for a landing. Do we want to bring him full screen for a bit?
Let's have a look at Trevor.
Yeah. Let's do full screen.
Just in case he's going to crash, we want to see that.
Oh, is that his landing pad?
That is his landing pad.
Come on, Trevor. Show us how it's done. Oops.
Now, again, if you're watching on 400 AGL or the Grumpy Vlogger or on Thunderbird 6's channel, those are the three channels we're simulcast on today. There we go. There's Grumpy
There's Trevor.
There's Trevor.
Okay, now for whatever reason we didn't have audio from Trevor today. I don't know why that is. Like we said, he's going via OBS and all of this other stuff, and there may have been a break in the chain. When we tested it, we did have audio, but not today. But that was pretty cool. So let's continue with some more news. The next one we've got today, this one is OzByDrone, and this story is about a new product on the market. Joby Aviation has released video footage of their air taxi in flight. The quiet all-electric vehicle can carry 5 passengers at a distance of 150 miles at speeds of up to 200 miles per hour, according to the release. Word on the street that Joby is preparing to go public in the near future. Let's look. We got some video for that.
Ground frequency will be suspended forward flight momentarily. Copy.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to have a look at this product in the context of, we had a look at the story last week of the Chinese company, what are they called, Ehang?
Ehang, yeah.
Yeah, we had a look at that last week where their factory was empty. Question is, how much of Ehang and also Joby is reality versus marketing hype? But here's another angle. In a couple of minutes, we're going to have a look at an aircraft investigation report. And this is, again, a vehicle that's intended to eventually be a manned vehicle.
Yeah.
So, yeah, this is an interesting one. Let me just do a couple of tweaks on the audio. There we go. Okay. So we've still got Trevor in the background there. He might throw in another pack as we talk today. Let me see if we've got anyone else ready to come in.
You know, I have a question about all these new drones. Now, are those motors electric?
Okay, take.
Oh, we've got audio.
We got audio.
Here we go.
There we go. So, Trevor, where are you? Where were you flying today? Now, there is a very big lag on the RTMP from Trevor, so we'll ask the question. And wait for
Have a
his
cup
answer.
of coffee.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
It's going through 2 RTMP proxies in the path to us. Where was I? So
I asked if those motors were electric.
yeah, short answer, don't know. I'd need to do a little bit more digging into that. But let's talk about. Let's move on to our next story. Now, here's what I'm going to do, John.
Yeah.
I'm going to set you up with the story and get you to talk a little bit high level. And then while you're doing that, I'm going to go and get the links and put them into the chat so people can have a look at this themselves, because this is an absolutely insane story.
This is the crash.
Yeah, so we're going to be our own air crash investigation today. There's no video with this, but so the aircraft is the Alorda Airspeeder Mark II. It's a racing drone prototype, and it crashed during a 2019 demo. First, it made an uncommanded climb to 8,000 feet. And then, theoretically, they were before then trying to hit the kill switch, but the kill switch didn't work, and it eventually crashed. Now, it's a pretty damning report. Do you want to comment at a high level about that while I go and get the links and put them into the chat?
Yeah, thanks, Greg. It is a damning report. So one of the interesting elements of the airplane is it weighed 210 pounds, 95 kilos. It's clearly an aircraft in the very high risk category. The company was developing drones for racing, and eventually they want to have manned, if you like, quadcopters that they can racing, much like you saw in Star Wars with the pod races. Of course, they see that as being the way it would look one day. And at the moment, their test vehicles are unmanned. So this was an air show where they were demonstrating the aircraft to a group of people at an airfield. And it's the same airfield as where they construct the aircraft. And it just went off. One of the really crazy things here is, if you look at the actual detail, is that the day before these guys had a prang. They had an autopilot suggested perhaps autopilot problem, and so they decided they pranged the airframe, but then they took the faulty autopilot and put it in the second airframe, and then flew it on the test day. On the demonstration day, after not even looking at why that aircraft crashed or what the problem was. So clearly they've got some problems in terms of the way they do their safety and their business. The other thing is that's come down from the Transportation Safety Board is that the CAA in the UK just dropped the ball on this one completely. They did not see it coming. First of all, there was for that weight aircraft, there was no recognised manufacturing standards used at all in terms of aircraft manufacturing standards. They just gave this thing a license without any checks and balances at all. The CAA is suggesting that perhaps some of them more inexperienced people, maybe someone thought it was 9 kilos instead of 95 kilos. I mean, could it be just that as simple as a dot point error that the regulator would let that go through? They've never seen the aircraft. They've never watched it. They've never examined it. That's a high-risk airplane.
Can I go back? Let's go back to the start. So the person flying it was an Australian pilot.
Yep.
He had a REPL.
Yep.
He went to the UK, and he did not do any local accreditation, and certainly flying under their laws and regulatory framework, he didn't get a license. But the people there still, from the CAA over there, still gave him approval to fly.
Well, there is first of all, with the pilot licensing, there's an internationally recognised standard amongst when you fly somewhere. Because remember, many pilots fly all over the world, and they don't have a license for every country they fly to. So ICAO have the 155 member countries have agreements that licenses are accepted. Now, when I went to America and I tried to get my American license, they said no, you'll fly while you're in Hawaii. You're going to fly on your Australian license as an international pilot. And they said, but to do that, I had to fly an Australian registered aircraft. So, of course, if I was flying in a Qantas airplane over to America and I landed in Hawaii, I'm an Australian pilot flying Australian registered aircraft. I don't need any licenses or any approvals because ICAO, the International Civil Aviation Organization, says that in each of those countries, we'll make sure that everybody's licensed and ready to go. So that's part of it. Now, he wasn't flying an Australian registered aircraft, as far as what I can see. He was flying a UK aircraft.
That was the point that I was. Yeah, well, no,
right.
It was an Australian-built aircraft, and they took it over there to the UK. But was it registered? And certainly, that's an interesting question. Now, does drone registration? Well, does drone registration now, under the new regulations, mean that you can take it to any ICAO registered country if you're an REPL holder and allow you to fly it internationally?
Well, he would have had to have approvals in this country, no? So let's just go over that for a second, because I didn't know. It's an Australian-built aircraft, right?
Australian-built aircraft, yeah.
Okay, so if it was, and it was registered for operation in Australia, he would have a high-weight REPL. He'd have a REOC to operate it. They'd have a SORA-based ConOps risk register for the aircraft. They have all of these things in place, or he wouldn't be able to fly it in Australia. He's certainly got to be, if you're going to fly it overseas, you've got to be able to fly it in Australia. Now, I don't believe all of those things are in place. So there is a grey area here we need to cover. Has CASA seen that aeroplane? Has CASA?
So that's a good question. And reading the report, the CAA in the UK actually asked for information from CASA, who initially responded and said, we will only be able to provide that with the consent, because of our privacy laws, of the owner of the REPL and so forth.
Yeah,
so,
I see.
And then the CAA in the UK withdrew that request. I don't know, it just smells a little bit sus there, because if it was totally above board, they would have gone to the people who, crashed it and said, hey, can we get the data from CASA? And all of a sudden, they would be in a very, very bad light, because all of the things that they thought were in place obviously weren't in place.
Yeah, that's right. Oh, I don't believe they had everything in place. I think there's definitely clearly some problems here, and the problems go in with even the maintenance things that we heard. They weren't. If CASA had approved it, they weren't following the CASA procedures at all. And it comes back to Greg. There's a lot of pressure here, and this is what we've seen at air shows around the world in the past. Everybody knows the crashes at air shows that happen. When the Airbus aeroplane was first crashed into the trees there, when they had a computer problem. So what happens is these aerospace manufacturers and people who are trying to get venture capital to run their businesses go to air shows, and they do these mad tests showing how capable their machines are, and they're not ready. They're not ready. They certainly don't have a lot of runs on the board with them. It's a real issue. I should have been having a static display of the airplane, perhaps, if it hasn't done a lot of flying. I'm just sitting in the lounge chair here throwing balls up in the air for everyone to talk about. So, that's what it is.
Let's move on. Yeah.
Well, early on, I heard John mention something I think is probably the crux of the whole problem. He mentioned a decimal point. It was, they thought it was 9 pounds or 9 kilos, and it turned out it was 90 kilos. Well, see, they're using metrics. If you guys would use good old pounds, you'd be able to tell the difference. You wouldn't have this kind of crap happen.
9 pounds versus 90 pounds would probably still be the same thing. Let's move on. I've posted a link to the PDF of this full investigation report in the chat. For those who are watching and want to look along, have a look at page number 10, and it talks about Figure 8, the ground-based kill switch. And the system for killing the aircraft in the case of an emergency, in case of an uncontrolled flyaway, it has to be done via a laptop, which is connected via a USB port, which is then connected via another interface, which appears to be an RJ45 port mounted on the board. And the board itself, it's a breadboard, not a completed circuit board. This is a breadboard where people have mounted bits and pieces, and the whole thing is held together, sorry to say it, with sticky tape and glue. I'm exaggerating, there is no sticky tape, but you get the point that I'm making. This is not a final product. Now, how can you be flying that anywhere other than at a test facility, at a public show, at a public location. And on the day in question,
Absolutely.
once it was starting to fly away, they tried to do the kill switch, and there was a disconnected wire, a broken wire or something in their kill switch system, which meant that it wasn't transmitted and the drone kept flying.
Yep. Mm.
It's called bribes. We do it here all the time.
A lot of this smells very, very wrong. And I think, it's going to show, really, I suppose, it's not new in business. People try to get away with this stuff. But it essentially it's bad for all of us. It's one of those things that will be, and I certainly think it's going to be bad for the regulators. That's the big one. They are not going to be looked on favourably over this. They have screwed this up big time, because whatever it was, they didn't have the checks and balances in place to cover this.
And again, if you're following along, looking at the PDF report on page 10, you've got the resoldered power cable and the relay, and it looks like expanding foam holding all of this together.
I mean, if you put the manufacturer and maintenance stuff in, it's awful. But if you put together an airplane that weighs 210 pounds, do you think, like when you're sort of getting towards the end of the construction, you're thinking, I wonder if we should check whether this is legal, or it's probably not. So, what at what point did they think about the safety of people on the ground?
Yeah.
Probably not. Said, oh, well, and it fell into a field. It fell quite close to houses, but it didn't hurt anyone on the ground. But if it did,
they should have hired the flying lawn chair guy the flying lawn chair guy. They should have hired him to develop.
Do you know what?
I think safety.
I want to say something on that. No, let me come back to that. I'll come back to that. I'm looking now a little bit further, just under figure 10, and you can see some bad soldering with excessive flux and the use of solder bridges and a capacitor installed with the incorrect orientation on the board compared with diagrams and what have you. It's just, again, I'm embarrassed to say that this was Australian. It was Australian designed, Australian built, and we're saying that this is something that we want to go and show off overseas. And I'm glad in one respect that I haven't seen any data from CASA, because I would hope that CASA has not given any green lighting to any of this.
And as Tinto says, and we're told to be aware of Chinese drones.
Yeah.
Yeah, watch
funny.
out for Australian drones.
Watch out for Australian drones. Exactly. Yeah.
For the Yanks out there that didn't understand what Greg said, he meant soldering. I know he says it wrong, but that's the American.
Hang on a
translation.
second. Hang on. Go back. What do you say?
Spell
what do you
it.
call it, Lloyd? Soldering.
Soldering. Yeah.
I don't want to know about your.
Leave it there.
Let's not go there.
Soldering.
Yeah.
The L is silent in America.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. Look, there's a lot more data in this report. There is just so much. Handheld transmitter, 3-axis gimbal, yada yada, transmitter frequency.
Well, I think we should do, Greg and Lloyd. We should keep our eye on this. Like, get a bit of a radar out and see what we can dig up. Now, I'm going to the AAUS conference next week, so which is going to be fun. We're going to have 2 days, full days of conferences. Our regulator is going to be there, CASA Air Services. It's a really great get-together. I'm actually talking on Beyond Visual Line of Sight flying and all that sort of stuff. So I'm going to put on my investigator's Sherlock Holmes hat very quietly and discreetly and start poking around and asking people what they know about it. Did you say you're going to be discreet?
You better not tell anyone.
No, I'm not going to tell anyone at all. I won't tell anyone. So if you're there, don't tell anyone else. But I'm gonna sort of get around with my notebook and I'm going to start asking some hard questions. I'm just going to sort of say, do you know about this? Do you know about that? And look, probably a lot of people will say, hey, I know nothing. But you know what? I might find something. I might find, and I'll come back next week and we'll share it.
Just before we move on, I'm looking at, again, some images in this report, and apologies I don't have all of these funky pictures. There's just too much to get it all prepared.
It's a lot to unpack.
Figure 22, they're showing the ESCs for this held on with cable ties, not screwed or otherwise affixed. They're just cable ties, and you've got connectors, Ethernet connectors, which in one case became dislodged, and you've got hot glue gun bits on a board holding the wires steady.
Oh, yeah. Well, some of these techniques are used in good manufacturing, cable ties and hot glue, wire placement and looms.
John,
it's not this aircraft.
No, it is. If you're building something that's, couple of kilo, then maybe you can do some of those things.
There's a lot of cable ties in Boeings, mate, but it's how it's a standard. It's how they're done, where it's used.
There are cable ties for cables, but not for holding an ESC to the airframe.
No, not in this case. Definitely not. Not with a sort of machine that heavy. It needs to be built to better standards, and that's why we have the 25 kilo limit. Above 25 kilos, once you come into the medium category, there are basic airframe standards that you have to have that go beyond the 25. And that's, well, in Australia, as we know, we have the 250 gram, we have 2 kilos, we have 7 kilos for pilots, 25 kilos. And then after that, 150. Once you go above 150 kilos or whatever that is in La La Land, so 300 pounds or more, then you've got, more rules. You've got to be certified. The aircraft's got to be properly certified.
Yeah. While we're just having a little break there, so we've got Trev in the background going for some flight over water. It's a shame the audio is not working again. Don't know why, but that's something Trev and I will chat about later. We'll leave that in the background. I like that foreshot. And if anyone else wants to fly and be part of the stream today, the instructions are in the chat on the OzByDrone channel. If you're watching on the Grumpy Vlogger or 400 AGL or Thunderbird 6, if someone could do us a favour and post that info across over there as well, that'd be cool. And encourage everyone who's here today to go and subscribe to those channels. Lloyd's been posting the links in the description, so in the chat, so that'd be cool as well. Now,
400 AGL is down again, so I don't know what's going on. Yeah.
It's gone down? Okay.
Yeah. Well, I set it back to private again. I think he was having problems with that earlier, so.
Okay. Not sure, but anyway, still encourage you to go and support those channels. Let's move on. Our next story today is we're going to go supersonic. So the world's first supersonic unmanned combat aerial vehicle able to reach speeds of Mach 2.1 officially launches with a $16 million price tag. Called Arrow, the drone is designed with a single shell made of lightweight carbon fiber that allows it to reach speeds of up to Mach 2.1, exceeding the speed of sound. Let's have a look.
Wow.
Now, John, I'm just wondering if we're going to put this into sports mode soon.
Oh, yeah. Look at that. I definitely want to have that in my headphones when I'm flying FPV.
Absolutely.
That's the sound I want to hear.
Maybe we can artificially generate that and put that on board on the DJI FPV drone.
Now, that's unmanned?
Unmanned.
Wow.
So let's leave that video there. We get the idea. That is way cool, though.
That's very cool.
Look,
awesome.
The reason why it's cool is all of these different use cases outside recreational and photography. Ultimately, some of their technological advancements, whether it be AI or whatever, eventually flow through to the stuff that we're flying. But really cool. And speaking of which, Mars, everyone has seen a little bit of that. Let's play that in just a couple of moments. But Ingenuity was developed at NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratories in Pasadena, and it's an engineering marvel. Even though NASA doesn't label the unmanned craft as a drone or a UAV, it fits the bill. It flies independently of human interaction. It's electrically powered and uses blades to generate lift. The exact specs are fascinating, given the fact that the Mars atmosphere has about 1% the density of Earth's, which means the ratio of the blade's surface to weight is totally different. The rover itself weighs 4 pounds or 1.8 kilos, which translates to about 1.6 pounds on Mars, so almost a quarter. The wingspan of the blades is 4 feet. So according to the data I was looking at, the two blades counter-rotate to eliminate torque at 2,400 revolutions per minute, creating the lift to counter the weight of the vehicle and fly. So do you think, John, again, same question that I asked before, do you think some of this will come back in terms of their technology to the drone market, and what do you think it'll be?
Oh, look, it always does. I mean, from the time NASA invented the electric toothbrush, you know. And,
did NASA invent the electric toothbrush?
And the ballpoint pen, and lots and lots of stuff. Yeah, got some good scientists there, and these guys have always shared the great things they've learned. And there's no doubt about that. It'll certainly come back. Look, one of the things is about, of course, is lightweight robotics and manipulating arms. Our aircraft are very, very simple in terms of the only really moving part, of course, is the camera gimbals technology, and also the engines themselves, the motors. But of course, one of the things that's going to get better and better is the way optics are developed. Now, of course, you know, in your smartphone now you've got absolutely incredible blend of cameras, and I'm expecting to see some of that shared technology come into multiple lens cameras that will give us an even better experience from the ground. I think, you know, that we'll always get these benefits flow on for sure.
Yeah.
Can I say NASA are developing a sense and avoid technology that is going to be revolutionary as well for the drone industry. So that will be AI. It will be air sense. So if a drone detects a manned aircraft, it actually knows are going to take over and move the drone out of the way. And who knows, if it's robust and is dependable and becomes mandatory, we'll be able to fly a bit higher quite legally, you know.
Well, sense and avoid isn't a new thing. I mean, NASA didn't invent it. Moonshiners invented it years ago. They were trying to sense and avoid them revenuers going to breast up their stills. We've been doing it for years in the mountains. You know, it's nothing new.
Sense and avoid is been in the mountains for a while. Obviously, you know, random breath testing and all sorts of reasons why sense and avoid works.
There you go. Sense and avoid is built into the Waze navigation app for your car when you're navigating, and it tells you there's an RBT station ahead.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. We've got a couple more to go yet today. Aerovell is developing a new drone that it calls a flex rotor, which is designed to take off and land vertically like a helicopter, then transition into horizontal flight using wings for lift like an airplane. Aerovell says the flex rotor can stay aloft for 32 hours, a record for drones in its class, providing overhead surveillance for military, law enforcement, or other civilian uses. There we go, the vertical takeoff.
Wow.
Look, interesting from a curiosity perspective. How do other aircraft technologies, I mean, what's preventing another aircraft from hitting 32 hours? I don't think it's the vertical takeoff that gives it that. But it certainly does have kind of similarities to a lot of the, what's the name, SpaceX, in terms of how they're landing. It just reminds me of that a lot.
You know, I said something earlier about Thunderbird 6 and, asking, did he get the name from the series Thunderbird? You look at that thing, it looks like it's right out of the Thunderbirds.
Yeah. It's pretty remarkable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Would you buy one? And what would you use it for?
You'd have to sell a couple of houses to buy something like that.
Yeah. But why would you do that instead of a regular VTOL?
Oh, look, the possibilities, and you've seen the evolution. Remember we talked about VTOLs being the thing of the future. So currently where we are with VTOLs is we've got a platform where we've got a quads arrangement, say, and then a pusher. And so the airplane takes off, and then when the pusher starts flying and the wings take the lift, the motors just stop turning, right? So
exactly,
it's a bit of a waste. They're not doing anything. They're only being used for 2 minutes. Then we've got what we call tilt roller technology. So when we've got the engines pointing up, we take off vertically, and then we point the engines forward, of course, and then we're using our pusher prop. We can do away with the pusher prop. Now, it's a tricopter, is a classic one, two in the wings and then one on the tail is a way to do it. Now, the idea, like the Wingtrad does, is to say, let's just have the forward propulsion propeller and turn the aeroplane up that way. So then we can take, because we've got the autopilot and stability to do it, we've only got the one propeller and we can take off vertically. And then, of course, all sorts of possibilities. But when you've got a tilt rotor, let me tell you, there's a point of failure in a tilt rotor. And if you get a servo jam, and remember you've got your engine hanging onto that robotic servo, we know because we've done a few of these, if you have a tilt rotor failure in transition, you've lost the airframe. That's it. It's usually above your head while it's doing it, or it's coming into landing and you're over the top and you have it. So moving parts, it's always the least moving parts that you have. So we're going to see the next generation of VTOLs will be this type of airframe that takes off vertically, like your SpaceX rocket, and then transitions to forward flight, and off it goes forever. Fantastic economy, not having to have vertical rotors.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's go on to our next story, and this is going to be our last one. This one is interesting. So, some of the earliest recorded aircraft designs, including the ones depicted in Leonardo da Vinci's sketches, were ornithopters. Machines that incorporated flapping wings, much like the birds and insects, in order to get into the air. We had a flappy one earlier, and here's another one. Hundreds of years later, a team of engineers in Russia returned to those insect-inspired routes with a dragonfly-like ornithopter called Serenity, and this was reported in Gizmodo. Now, when I got this ready to show to everyone, it originally had some music which I couldn't unfortunately share, and I've pulled the music out but still kept the sound of the aircraft, and this is really cool.
The sound of the aircraft is more interesting than any music could be.
Yeah. There's a few traces of the music here and there, but it's just way cool to look at. Let me get some... Okay.
There's another $500,000 worth of somebody's college education being wasted on a stupid giant mosquito.
I love the way you look at some things, Lloyd.
ultimately, these people belong in a boardroom. These people belong in a boardroom because you've heard of the seagull effect in a boardroom, haven't you, John?
Yes, I have. The seagull effect. I've heard the seagull effect.
Where people fly into a meeting, flap their wings around, and then crap all over everyone, and then fly away.
That's amazing.
This one's flapping their wings as well. That was a little bit of the music that remained, but anyway.
Well, that's pretty cool.
Again, why?
Why not?
Ruli.
Because they could.
Let's see, they don't even speak English. That's the next part. Yeah, okay. Yeah.
It was in Russia. Now, just before we finish up for the day, there's our last and final shot from the aircraft of our friend Trevor. Is it still a live feed or is it frozen? No, I think it's still a live feed. Let me have a look. No, 92 kilobits per second. There's only a little bit there. If Trevor's there, you're welcome to give it one last takeoff. If not, we'll call it a day for today. Let's just give it a few seconds. While we're waiting for Trevor to either take off or not, John, last thoughts and comments for you of the day.
Well, just to say that if you are in Australia and coming to the RPAS conference in Canberra, love to see you there. Please come and say hello. We will probably have some OzByDrone signs up. I've got my mug and my T-shirt. So you'll find us easily, Morrison Aero Robotics. And come along to the talk, and it'll be a great place to ask questions and be part of. So this, I believe you can still attend if you want to buy just an attendance ticket, or you can attend virtually. That's for everyone. RPAS in Australian skies, AAUS, Alpha Uniform Sierra, is the place to Google, and you can attend the conference. So love to see you there. It's going to be fun.
Absolutely. And Lloydie?
I only have one thing to say.
That's a very... There's no porpoise in that at all, Lloyd, honestly. I think every time you use that thing, you're being very shellfish.
Look, these jokes are a little bit fishy, if you ask me.
Giving me a headache.
Trevor's flying there. I'll tell you what we're going to do today. We're going to leave that on the screen, and we'll have the music happening in the background. Before we do go today, though, I have to say thank you for watching. Thanks for being part of OzByDrone.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls.
Yes, there you go. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls.
That's what happens when you press buttons at the same time as your producer to try and confuse her. I'm trying to get the music underneath the picture. So we're going to have that shot and that shot, leave that one live, and we're going to kill that one and that one. Ladies and gents, thanks for being part of the show. Thanks for watching. If you've got it, actually, I did forget one thing. Let me do that. Leave that on the screen and send in this information. If you would like to be part of the show in the future, please do send some information to upload@gregkuhnert.com or send videos to upload@gregkuhnert.com, and we'll include that at some point in the future. If you'd like to follow us on social media, that would always be appreciated. Or if there's anything you'd like to send physically, you can reach us at 5/127 Princes Highway, Sylvania, New South Wales 2224. So we'll go and say thanks for watching. Thanks for being part of the show. We'll leave Trev on the screen. See you next time. Bye-bye for now.
Bye, everybody.